Good afternoon, scholars of room 502. Let's get started with our benchmark. Remember, if you don't have this text for close reading, please have your parents text me and I'll see what I can do to get one. Today we're looking for words and phrases that describe Lad the dog. Remember when we did a little summary, it says Lad is a very important dog to his owners. He feels he is like a king and others, including people, are inferior to him. So we're going to look for the words that describe Lad. We'll start on page 14 at the top. There were other people at the place, people to whom a dog must be courteous as becomes a thoroughbred. So he's a purebred dog, so we're going to circle thoroughbred, or you can highlight that if you like. You have your avid binder still with you. And whose caresses he must accept. Very often there were guests too, and from puppyhood, Lad had been taught the sacredness of the guest law. Civilly, he would endure the pettings of their these visiting outlanders. Gravely, he would shake hands with them on request. He would even permit them to paw him or haul him about if they were of the obnoxious dog-mauling breed. But the moment politeness would permit, he always withdrew very quietly from their reach, and if possible from their sight as well. So we can see how that describes him. He withdraws very quietly when he thinks it's polite to do so. Of all the dogs on the place, Big Lad alone had free run of the house by day and by night. He slept in a cave under the piano. He even had access to the sacred dining room at meal times, where always he lay to the left of the master's chair. With the master, he would willingly unbend for a romp at any time or all times. So for the master, he'll play around, joyfully play around. So we're going to circle willingly unbend for a romp. At the mistress's behest or request, he would play with all the silly abandon of a puppy. So we're going to circle that too. Play with all the silly abandon of a puppy. Rolling on the ground at her feet, making as though to seize and crush one of her little shoes in his mighty jaws, wriggling and waving his legs in the air. That gives us a pretty good example of how he plays. When she buried her hand in the masses of his chest ruff, and otherwise comporting himself with complete loss of dignity. So he becomes like a puppy here. Let's take a look at this picture. It looks like it's probably the mistress there, and there's Lad, and they have a canoe down the river, it looks like. Let's see what happens. But to all except these two, he was calmly unapproachable. Let's go ahead and circle calmly unapproachable. From his earliest days, he had never forgotten he was an aristocrat among inferiors. So we're going to circle aristocrat among inferiors. An aristocrat's usually a wealthy, dignified person. And calmly aloof, he moved among his subjects, and he treats them like they're his subjects. He thinks that highly of himself. Then, all at once, into the sweet routine of the house of peace came horror. It began on a blustery, sour October day. The mistress had crossed the lake to the village in her canoe, with Lad curled up in a furry heap in the prow. There's the prow and there's Lad curled up. So I'm going to circle furry heap. That's a good description of Lad. On the return trip, about 50 yards from shore, the canoe struck sharply and obliquely against a half-submerged log that a fall freshet, I don't know what that is, I'm going to have to look that up, had swept down from the river above the lake. At the same moment, a flow of wind caught the canoe's quarter, and after the manner of such eccentric craft, the canvas shell proceeded to turn turtle. The canvas shell proceeded to turn turtle. Think about that image. Let's go to the next page. We're going to find out Lad's courageous feat, I think, coming up here. Yeah, there it turned turtle, flipped over. Into the ice-chill water splashed its two occupants. Lad bobbed to the top and glanced around at the mistress to learn if this was a new practical joke, but instantly he saw it was no joke at all, so far as she was concerned. Swathed and cramped by the folds of her heavy outing skirt, the mistress was making no progress shoreward because she's wearing a big heavy outer skirt. and the dog flung himself through the water toward her with a rush that left his shoulders and half his back above the surface. In a second he had reached her and caught her sweater shoulder in his teeth. She had the presence of mind to lie out straight as though she were floating, and to fill her lungs with a swift intake of breath. So she's lying flat so that Lad can drag her to shore. The dog's burden was made infinitely lighter than if she had struggled or had lain in a posture less easy for towing. Yet he made scant headway until she wound one hand in his mane, and still lying motionless and stiff, bade him loose his hold on her shoulder. In this way, by sustained effort that wrenched every giant muscle in the collie's body, they came to land. Vastly rejoiced was Lad. So he's very happy. He's vastly rejoiced was Lad, and inordinately proud, very proud of himself. And the plaudits, or the congratulations of the master and the mistress, were music to him. Indefinably, he understood he had done a very wonderful thing, and that everybody on the place was talking about him, and that all were trying to pet him at once. Master's voice soon quieted down, and the incident seemed to end. Okay, but it looks like there's more to go. Here we see a picture of Lad, and he's scratching at a door. Let's see what happens. Instead, it had just begun, for within an hour the mistress, who for days had been half sick with a cold, was stricken with a chill, and by night she was in the first stages of pneumonia. Then over the place descended gloom, a gloom Lad could not understand, until he went upstairs at dinner time to escort the mistress, as usual, to the dining room. But to his light scratch at her door there was no reply. He scratched again, and presently master came out of the room and ordered him downstairs again. Then from the master's voice and look, Lad understood that something was terribly amiss, because he recognized the master's voice and his look. Also, as she did not appear at dinner, and as he was for the first time in his life forbidden to go into her room, he knew the mistress was the victim of whatever mishap had befallen. So here's Lad looking sadly at the mistress's door. A strange man with a black bag came to the house early in the evening. So that's back in the day when doctors would make house calls. They'd come with their little black bag. And he and the master were closeted for an interminable time in the mistress's room. Lad had crept dejectedly upstairs behind them and sought to crowd into the room at their heels. The master ordered him back and shut the door in his face. Lad lay down on the threshold, his nose to the crack of the bottom of the door, and waited. He heard the murmur of speech. Once he caught the mistress's voice. It was changed and muffled, and with a puzzling new note to it, but undeniably the mistress's, and his tail thumped hopefully on the hall floor. I could just hear that dog's tail thumping, so I'm going to circle that as a way to describe Lad. But no one came to let him in, and after the mandate to keep out, he dared not scratch for admittance. "Those other dogs of yours outside there," the doctor said to the master, as they went down the stairs, "raised a fearful racket when my car came down the drive just now. Better send them all away somewhere till she is better. The house must be kept perfectly quiet." "I'll send them over to the boarding kennels in the morning," he answered. "All except Lad. He and I are going to see this through together. He'll be quiet if I tell him to. So as you can see, Lad is an important dog amongst all those other dogs that he has. And tomorrow we're going to take a look back at this story and look at some more language in it, so that we could better be prepared to write to our source. Be sure you head on over to social studies sometime today after this. And be sure you take the math quiz if you didn't on Google Classroom. And I will talk to you tomorrow.